Hi friends, Colleen Beamish here. Thank you so much for joining me for another card video. Today's video will feature two cards, both made with products I haven't used before. So first of all, I have these cardstock packs from scrapbook.com. I have the Happy Rainbows die set from My Favorite Things, the I Miss Your Hugs stamp set from My Favorite Things, which is so cute. I love the sentiment that I'll be using today. And then I have the Detail Bohemian cover plate die from Simon Says Stamps. So without further ado, let's get into it. So off camera, I went ahead and did some die cutting. I cut out the rainbow using some pretty warm toned cardstock, and then I also cut the card base using the cover plate die, and I trimmed that down so there will be a border around it. So now I'm going to go ahead and do some stamping. To start with, I'm using some Gina Amalgam black ink, and I'm taking this little heart speech bubble stamp from the stamp set, and I'm going to stamp it down just using an acrylic block. Now, I don't want that little speech bubble portion of it, like I just want it to be the circle with the heart. So as I ink it up, I'm just going to avoid getting ink on that little like bottom triangle portion of it, and it works pretty well. If you don't think that you could easily not get ink on it, you can always just wipe off the ink after covering the stamp. And I really like how it turns out. I did want a little bit more of a solid image, so I'll go ahead and stamp it twice. And again, you can do this in your stamp repositioning tool if you're a little worried about lining it up to restamp. So I'll just go ahead and fussy cut that out. I sped this up because I'm such a slow fussy cutter. And I think I'm just a slow crafter in general, which I never really noticed until I'm making these videos and watching them back, and I'm just take forever to do very simple tasks. Let me know do you consider yourself a fast crafter or someone who goes pretty slow and takes their time? So now I put some vellum in my MISTI, and I'm lining up the stamp that I want to use as my sentiment. And this stamp says, "I tested positive for missing you," which I think is such a cute, silly sentiment. And I'm just going to stamp that down using some black ink on the vellum. Because vellum is such a slick surface, it's very hard to get a solid image, and it was really bugging me. I think I actually stamped this down like 15 times, hoping that one of the stampings would just change how it looks, but it doesn't. And if that's something that bothers you, you can definitely heat emboss it instead. I don't have any black heat embossing powder, and I didn't want to do white or metallic, so I just went with it. So now I cut this down to a strip that will span my card, and then I'm going to go ahead and start to adhere down the rainbow arches. So I take out those middle two arches to kind of visualize where I want this outside arch to be lined up, and then I'll just use some liquid glue to go ahead and adhere that down to the card. So once I have that outside arch perfectly adhered, I'll go ahead and add the inner two arches as well and just make those line up perfectly. The fun thing with this die is that when you use it to cut from one color cardstock, you're getting all the arches in that one color. So you can put together like 6 different rainbows at one time, just rearranging the colors however you want. So now I'll go ahead and adhere that heart as well, and again I'm just using some liquid glue. And something that I didn't plan but I love is that the little heart lines up perfectly with the cover plate die. Like there's a flower, you'll see it when I show the up close pictures, but it lines up perfectly in that center flower, and I just think it's really cute. It looks like a little starburst or something. So now I'm playing with the sentiment, and I knew I wanted to fold the vellum back behind this card. Looks extremely similar. It is actually the second card. The colors of the rainbows are kind of rearranged differently, and again I have this vellum strip and I'm playing with what to do with it. And for this one, I think go ahead and try stapling it, see how it looks, just try something new out. So I take my Tim Holtz tiny attacher and I add a staple to each side of this vellum piece. And I immediately wasn't really a fan. So of course then I go and add more staples because that's definitely the solution. And then I really don't like how it looks. I think the one staple was tolerable, but the 2 on each side is not. So I go back to the first card and I changed the plan entirely, and I decide to just stamp directly on the card front. So I line this up in my MISTI, and I'll just use some Gina ink to stamp this down. The reason this wasn't the plan from the beginning is because that background is so textured and I thought I wouldn't get a clear image when stamping down the sentiment. But as you can see here, it looks absolutely perfect. So now I'm just bringing in a card base, and that's Neenah Classic Crest Solar White 110-pound cardstock. And I'm just lining it up, making sure I like how it looks. And then I'll use some craft foam to pop this up on the card. You could definitely use foam tape for this, but since it's just going to be one solid rectangle, I might as well just use the craft foam. So I cut that down to size, and then I'll just use some liquid glue to go ahead and adhere the foam to the card front, and then the card front to the card base. And that is the first card done. I really like how this one turned out. It's very clean and simple and just happy. So let's get into the second card. So this is the one that I made a mistake on technically because I don't like how those staples look. And what I ultimately do is that I remove the staples, trim down this piece so that it's just like a slimmer card front, and then I'm going to adhere it onto the card that way. The situation though is that since I had already trimmed it down to have a border, it won't reach the top and bottom of the card. So I would have just had it be a skinnier centralized card front, but that wasn't working out. So I end up matting it with some yellow cardstock that matches that second rainbow arch. So now there's a border on all four sides of that middle piece. And before I adhere that to my card base, I'm going to go ahead and stamp the same sentiment the same way I did on the first card. So now to adhere it to the card base, I'll just use some craft foam just like I did with the other card. And yeah, that's basically the card done. I really like how this card turned out, although there were some mistakes along the way and it is a little bit of a variation on my usual style, but the yellow definitely adds a fun pop of color. So thank you so much for watching this video today. I hope it gave you some inspiration and maybe something to try. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed to my channel, please do. I would love to have you. And I'll be back with some more crafty content soon.